Vaughn called my periodic table a party favor. By sunrise, it was the ledger that buried him. The morning the whole thing broke, I was standing in the company kitchen holding a laminated periodic table the size of a placemat, and Vaughn Delacroix looked at it the way you'd look at a coupon that had already expired. He had his coat on. He had a rolling suitcase parked behind him with an airline tag still cinched around the handle, and he was pouring the last of the good coffee into a paper cup that said Cascade Systems on the side, in that teal we'd argued about for 2 weeks back in 2019. "You still carry that thing around," he said. It wasn't a question. It was the tone a man uses when he's already decided you're small. "Renata, we're a data firm. Nobody needs a science fair prop to close a deal." I set it flat on the counter, the way I'd set it flat on 1,000 lab benches, and I smoothed the corner where the lamination had started to lift after 14 years. I said, "It's not a prop, Vaughn. It's a map." He laughed, one short breath through his nose, and he picked up his cup and his suitcase, and he told me he had an early flight, and that he'd sent the quarterly files to my inbox, and that I should lock up. Then he walked out of the building we had built together, and I stood there with my map of every element that exists. And I understood, in the plain, unhurried way you understand a thing you've suspected for months, that he was already gone in every way that counted. What he had not bothered to learn, in 9 years of watching me carry that laminated chart from meeting to meeting, was that I read tables for a living long before I read spreadsheets, and that a woman who can hold 118 elements in her head and tell you which ones will quietly poison you does not misplace what matters. The chart wasn't sentiment. It was a habit of attention. And that habit was about to cost Vaughn Delacroix everything he thought he'd stolen clean. Let me tell you where the chart came from, because you can't understand the ending without the beginning of it. I'm Renata Sinclair. I'm 61 years old. For 22 years, I taught chemistry at Deering High School in Portland, Maine, third-floor lab, the one with the fume hood that rattled like a clothes dryer with a shoe in it. I raised my granddaughter, Wren, from the time she was 4, after my daughter Marguerite lost a long fight with something that had nothing to do with willpower and everything to do with a disease we don't like to name at dinner. So my life for a long stretch was bells and lesson plans and a small girl who needed her braids redone and a mortgage on a narrow house in the Rosemont neighborhood. And I want you to hold that picture, because it is the picture Vaughn had of me too, and it is the picture that let him underestimate me right off the edge of a cliff. The laminated periodic table came into my hands in the fall of 2010. A student of mine, a stubborn 16-year-old named Peter Okafor, who failed my class twice before he passed it, brought it to me on the last day of his senior year. He'd had it laminated at the Staples on Forest Avenue with his own money, $11, and he'd written along the bottom margin in silver marker, "For Mrs. Sinclair, who told me potassium was patient." I had told him that. I used to say the reactive elements aren't stupid, they're just impatient, and that patience was a kind of intelligence the periodic table could teach you if you let it. Peter went on to become a hydrologist for the state. He sends me a card every December. That chart was the first time in a long teaching life that a kid handed me back my own words and made them sound like something worth keeping. And I have carried it ever since, first to classrooms and then later to boardrooms. And Vaughn never once asked what the silver writing said. Here is how I got from the lab to the boardroom, because that turn is the whole spine of it. In 2014, the summer Wren turned 11, I built a little side thing at my kitchen table to make extra money, since a teacher's salary in Maine does not stretch to college the way people pretend it does. I'd noticed, grading years of lab reports, that I was good at something schools don't test for. I could look at a mess of raw numbers and see the shape hiding inside them, which reagents a district was over-ordering, which safety incidents clustered around which weeks. I started doing data cleanup for a few school districts on the side, contract work, evenings and summers, and it turned out that the same eye that catches a mislabeled beaker catches a mislabeled ledger, and within 2 years I had more work than I had evenings. That was when Vaughn Delacroix walked into my kitchen. He was the nephew of my next-door neighbor, 40 then, all easy handshake and good haircut, and he'd been laid off from a marketing job in Boston and had come back up to Maine to, as he put it, find something real. He was charming in the way that some people are charming the way other people are tall. It just came with the body, no effort behind it. He looked at my spreadsheets and my little client roster written out longhand in a green cloth notebook, and he said, "Renata, you've got the engine. I've got the sales. We could build something." And God help me, I believed him, because I was tired, and because a partner who could handle the handshakes meant I could keep one foot in the classroom I loved. We founded the company in March of 2016 and called it Meridian Data Partners. I owned 51% because I had the clients and the method. He owned 49% because he had the runway and, he said, the vision. I want to be honest with you. Those first years were good. He was good at rooms. He'd stand up and tell a story about unlocking the value trapped in your operations, and I'd sit down after and show them the actual numbers, and the two halves worked. We grew from 4 clients to 31. I finally left teaching in the spring of 2018, and I cried in the faculty parking lot for an hour before I could drive home, because that lab and that rattling fume hood had been my whole architecture for 22 years, and the chart came with me. It hung on the wall of my new office at first, and then, because I liked to point at it when I explained things, it became the thing I carried into every meeting. I'd lay it on the conference table and I'd say, every client is an element. Some are stable, some are volatile, and the whole art is knowing which is which before you mix them. Clients loved it. It made a data firm feel human. Vaughn tolerated it the way you tolerate a partner's odd tie. He never understood that the chart was how I thought. Now let me walk you through the erosion, because it didn't happen all at once, and the slowness of it is exactly what let me miss the danger until it was almost too late. The first sign came in the winter of 2021. Vaughn started taking meetings I wasn't in. He framed it kindly. "You've got Ren's college tours. Let me handle the boring stuff." And I let him, because Ren was 17 and touring schools in Massachusetts, and I wanted every hour with her I could get before she was gone. But I noticed that the green cloth notebook, the master list of who our clients were and what they paid, and who inside each company actually returned our calls, had moved from my desk drawer to the shared server, digitized for efficiency. I'd laid the periodic table over that notebook for years, the way you'd lay a hand over a sleeping child. When it went into the server, I felt something I didn't have a word for yet. I know the word now. The word was exposure. The second sign came that same spring. A woman named Tara Vance started appearing at our office. She ran business development at a competitor, a bigger firm out of Manchester, New Hampshire, called Kestrel Analytics, and she and Vaughn had, he said, a professional friendship. She was 53, sharp as a scalpel, and she looked at our office the way a realtor looks at a house she intends to flip. The first time she met me, she picked up my laminated chart off the conference table, turned it over, read the silver marker, and set it down without a word. And I saw in her face a fast, cool calculation. She had decided in 4 seconds that I was decoration. I've thought about that moment a great deal since. Tara was the strong current under Vaughn. He was the boat. I didn't understand yet that the boat goes where the current goes. The third sign was the money, and here I'll be specific because the numbers are the bones of this. Our revenue in 2020 was $1.4 million. In 2022, it should have been closer to $2 million, given our client count, but it came in at 1.51. Somewhere, a third of our growth was leaking out. I sat at my kitchen table on a Sunday in October of 2022 with the periodic table under my forearm. I still worked at that same table. Some habits are load-bearing. And I did the thing I'm good at. I looked at the mess, and I found the shape inside it. 4 of our best clients had quietly reduced their contracts by nearly the same percentage in the same quarter. That doesn't happen by accident. Clients don't coordinate. Somebody was coordinating them. The fourth sign, the one that should have been a klaxon, was small and human. Our office manager, a 68-year-old widower named Harlan Pruitt, who'd taken the job because his pension didn't cover his late wife's medical debt, stopped me by the printer one afternoon in November and said very quietly, without looking up from the paper tray, "Renata, you should look at who's been badging in on Saturdays." Then he walked away. Harlan wasn't a gossip. Harlan alphabetized the supply closet and cried at the office Christmas party every year over a woman named Dorothy who'd been gone 6 years. If Harlan risked saying something, it was because he'd already decided which side he was on, and it was mine. I want you to remember Harlan. He is the quiet hinge this whole door swings on. So I pulled the badge logs. Vaughn had badged in 11 Saturdays in a row, and each time, 20 minutes later, a second badge followed, a contractor credential we'd issued to Tara Vance 6 months earlier so she could, supposedly, consult on a joint project that had never once produced a deliverable. I did not confront him. I want to be clear about that, because the impatient version of me, the potassium version, wanted to walk into his office and set the whole thing on fire. But I'd spent 22 years teaching teenagers that the reaction you can't control is the one that hurts you. And I made myself be the patient element. I made myself watch. And while I watched, I did something that would matter more than anything else in this story, though it looked at the time like nothing at all. I started keeping my own record again, by hand, in a new green cloth notebook, and I laid the periodic table over it in my desk drawer the way I used to. Every anomaly, every dropped client, every Saturday badge, dated and initialed in my own writing. Chemistry teaches you to keep a lab notebook in ink, never pencil, because the record has to be able to testify. I kept mine in ink. Now here is where it all came to a head, and I'll tell it to you plainly because the humiliation of it still has an edge even now. On the morning of December 4th, 2022, that Monday I opened with, the coat and the suitcase and the paper cup, Vaughn flew to Nassau. He told the staff it was a vacation. What he'd actually done, in the small hours of that same morning, was export the entire Meridian client list. Every contract, every contact, every renewal date, the whole living body of the company I had built at my kitchen table, and sell it to Kestrel Analytics for a figure I would not learn for weeks. $420,000, wired to an account in his name with a side arrangement for a vice president title once the dust settled. He'd sold our clients to Tara's firm and split. And on his way out the door, with all of that already done, he had time to look at the one thing I carried that he couldn't digitize or steal, my laminated map of every element that exists, and call it a science fair prop. I found the export within the hour. I found it because I'd been watching, and because Harlan had left a printout of the server access log on my chair, face down with a paperweight on it, a smooth gray stone from Higgins Beach that he kept on his desk. He never said a word about it. He didn't have to. The log showed a bulk data pull at 3:12 a.m., authorized under Vaughn's credentials, routed to an external address that resolved, when Estelle's people traced it later, to Kestrel. Let me tell you about Estelle, because she's the second person who took my side, and the story doesn't end the way it ends without her. Estelle Marchetti had been my friend for 30 years and my lawyer for the last 10 of them. We met in 1994 when our daughters were in the same Brownie troupe, and she was the one who'd walked me through Marguerite's estate and Wren's guardianship without ever once making me feel like a charity case. She was 70 now, mostly retired, but she still kept an office over a bakery on Congress Street, and she still answered when I called. I called her at 8:40 that morning, standing in the company kitchen with the chart under my arm, and I said, "Estelle, he took the clients and ran." And she was quiet for a moment. And then she said the thing that changed the temperature of everything. She said, "Renata, I've been waiting for you to be ready to fight. Now sit down, because I have to tell you something you don't know yet, and it's the best thing that's happened to you in 2 years. Here is what I didn't know. For 8 months, without telling Vaughn, I had been quietly negotiating the sale of Meridian's parent stake, my 51%, and the operational engine, the methods, the software I'd built, to a much larger firm in Boston called Halyard Group. Estelle had brokered it. It was going to close in January. I'd kept it quiet because Vaughn had a habit of blowing up deals he didn't personally control, and because, if I'm honest, I'd started to suspect him, and I didn't want him near it. What I did not know, what Estelle had learned only that weekend, was the shape of what Halyard intended to do next. Halyard didn't just want Meridian. Halyard was in the final stage of acquiring Kestrel Analytics, too, Tara's firm, the very company Vaughn had just sold our clients to. The two deals were about to become one company, and when Estelle's people had structured the terms, they'd needed someone to run the combined operation, someone who understood both the data engine and the client base better than anyone alive. They'd chosen me. Let me say it as plainly as a listener needs to hear it, because this is the whole hinge of the thing. As of January, I was going to be the chief executive of the merged company, the same company that had just bought stolen goods from my own partner. Vaughn had sold our client list to Kestrel, and Kestrel was about to become mine. He had fled a burning house straight into a room I was about to own the deed to. He just didn't know it yet, and Tara didn't know it yet, and I was not going to tell either of them 1 minute before it served me to. Estelle asked me what I wanted to do, and this is the part where the impatient version of me lost, for good, to the patient one. I could have called the police that morning. Theft of trade secrets is a crime, Estelle confirmed it. But a criminal case would take years, and it would drag Meridian's name through the mud, and it would tell Vaughn and Tara exactly what I knew, exactly when I knew it, and it would let them lawyer up and shift assets and rehearse their stories. I didn't want a loud, slow, uncertain war. I wanted a quiet, precise, certain one. Chemistry again. You don't fight a fire with more fire. You cut off its oxygen. So over the next 3 weeks, while Vaughn was in Nassau posting photographs of a rented catamaran, I prepared. I want you to see exactly how, because the preparation is where the chart stopped being a map and became a ledger. Estelle and I documented everything. The 3:12 a.m. export, the 11 Saturdays, the 4 coordinated client reductions, the contractor credential issued to Tara Vance for a project with no deliverables. And here's the thing that made it airtight. Every single anomaly was already dated and initialed, in my hand, in ink, in that second green cloth notebook, because I'd been keeping a lab record for 2 months before he ran. When Estelle's forensic accountant, a meticulous young man named Devon Osei, laid my handwritten notebook next to the server logs and the wire records, they matched to the day. He looked up at me over his reading glasses and said, "Mrs. Sinclair, in 11 years, I have never seen a client hand me a timeline this clean." I told him I used to grade lab reports for a living, and a good record is just a good record. I laid the periodic table flat on Estelle's conference table the afternoon we finished assembling it all, the same gesture I'd made in 100 meetings, and I looked at the 118 elements, and I thought about Peter Okafor's silver marker. Potassium was patient, and I understood in that plain-spoken way that the chart had done exactly what I'd always told my students it would do. It had taught me to wait until the reaction was safe to run. We timed everything to the closing. Halyard's acquisition of both firms would finalize legally at 12:01 a.m. on a Saturday in the middle of January. The moment it did, I would be the sitting chief executive of the merged company with full authority over Kestrel's operations, Kestrel's contracts, and Kestrel's personnel, which, as of the terms Tara had negotiated for herself, included Vaughn Delacroix, who'd been promised his vice presidency inside Kestrel and had already, foolishly, signed an employment agreement to formalize it. He'd tied himself to the mast of the ship I was about to captain. Now the night it landed. This is the reckoning, and I'll take you through it the way it happened, because I've earned the right to tell it slow. Tara Vance got engaged that winter to a commercial real estate man named Colton Reeve, and she threw an engagement party the second Saturday of January at a restored barn venue in Cape Elizabeth, just south of Portland. All reclaimed wood and Edison bulbs, and a string quartet playing arrangements of songs that were never meant for strings. Half the regional business world was there, because Tara was the sort of woman who invited people she wanted to own, rather than people she loved. Vaughn was there, back from Nassau, tanned and loud, wearing a new watch and standing too close to Tara, the way a follower stands close to the person whose weather he lives inside. And I was there too, because Estelle and I had made very sure I was invited, in my role, my quiet, not yet announced role, as the incoming executive from Halyard, a courtesy invitation that Tara had extended without once imagining what it meant. The acquisition had closed at 12:01 that morning. By the time the party was in full swing at 9 in the evening, I had been, for 21 hours, the chief executive of the company that now owned both Meridian and Kestrel. Nobody in that barn knew it but me and Estelle, who sat at a corner table nursing a club soda and watching the room like a woman who'd waited 30 years to see her friend stop being underestimated. I want to describe Vaughn's tell, because I'd been watching for it my whole time in business with him, and it never once failed. When Vaughn was afraid, he rubbed the pad of his right thumb against the face of his watch, around and around, like he was polishing away a smudge only he could see. He did it in every meeting he thought was slipping. He did it the day the bank almost pulled our line of credit in 2019. And he was doing it now, at the party, before he even knew why. Some animal part of him had caught a scent. I watched him rub that watch face while he laughed too hard at something Colton said, and I thought, patient, patient. And I finished my sparkling water, and I took out my phone. I had one email drafted. I'd written it days earlier, and rewritten it, and cut it again, because I'd learned from 22 years of writing lab instructions that the shorter the direction, the harder it is to misread. It was addressed to Vaughn Delacroix, copied to Estelle, to Devin Osei, and to Halyard's general counsel. The subject line was one word, termination, and the body was 2 sentences. I'd made it 2 sentences on purpose, because I wanted him to be able to read the whole thing in the time it took to feel his stomach drop. The first sentence read, "Effective 12:00 a.m. today, Halyard Group's acquisition of Kestrel Analytics closed, and I was appointed chief executive of the merged company, which now holds the forensic record of your December 4th transfer of Meridian client data, including your own signed employment agreement acknowledging that data as Kestrel property." The second sentence read, "Your employment is terminated for cause as of this moment. Do not return to any premises and expect to hear from counsel regarding restitution of $420,000. I read it over one last time, standing near a table of untouched crab cakes under a string of Edison bulbs, with the periodic table folded in my bag against my hip, because I do not go into a reckoning without my map. And then I pressed send. I did not raise my voice. I did not cross the room. I have thought a great deal about what people expect at a moment like that. Some grand confrontation, some speech. But I'd learned the deepest lesson chemistry ever taught me, which is that the most complete reactions are often the quietest ones. No smoke, no flame, just one stable compound where 2 volatile ones used to be. So I simply watched Vaughn's phone light up in his breast pocket, and I watched him take it out, half smiling, expecting nothing. And I watched him read 2 sentences under the warm bulbs while the string quartet played something that used to be a rock song. His face didn't drain of anything. I want to be precise, because it wasn't the dramatic thing you might picture. What happened was slower and stranger and more true. He read it once, and his easy smile stayed on his mouth for a second too long, stranded there, like a man who stepped off a curb that wasn't where he thought it was. Then he read it again. And then his thumb went to the watch face, round and round, faster now, and his eyes came up off the phone and swept the room until they found me. And I looked back at him with the same flat, patient attention I'd once given a beaker that wasn't behaving, and he understood everything in that single look. He understood that I had known, that I had watched, that the science fair prop under my arm on the morning he ran had been, all along, the tell of a woman who keeps records in ink. He crossed to me anyway, because Vaughn was a follower to the end, and followers always come toward the strong current. And he said my name, Renata, in a voice that had lost all its easy handshake. And Tara Vance, who had seen his phone light up and had felt the party's temperature change the way predators feel weather, came up behind him, and she said, cool as ever, "What's this about, Renata?" She still thought she was the strong current in the room. She still thought I was decoration. I told them the truth in the plainest words I had, because a listener deserves plainness, and so did they. I said, as of this morning, I run the company that owns both your firms. Vaughn sold Meridian's clients to Kestrel. I now own Kestrel, which means he stole from a company he then went to work for, and I have every record of it, dated and signed, including by his own hand. And then I looked at Tara and I said the thing I'd been saving, the thing that was really the whole point of the patience. You built your side of this on him, Tara. You made him your instrument. I'd think hard, tonight, about what it means that your engagement party is the place where your instrument broke in your hands. Halyard's counsel will want to understand your firm's role in the transfer. I'd get your own lawyer before Monday. Tara Vance did not go pale, and she did not beg. That's not who she was, and I'd have been disappointed if she had. She simply set down her champagne, and something behind her eyes did a fast, cold recalculation. The same one I'd watched her do the first day she turned my chart over and read the silver marker. And I saw her begin, in real time, to distance herself from the man she'd pushed off the cliff. That was its own justice. He'd jumped because she'd been standing behind him. And now, in front of 200 guests, she was already stepping back to let him fall alone. Vaughn kept rubbing that watch. He said, "You can't do this," which is what weak men say when someone has, in fact, already done it. And I said, gently, because I am not a cruel woman and I had no need to be, "Vaughn, it's done. It was done at 1 minute past midnight. You've been terminated since before the string quartet arrived. Go home." And I picked up my bag with the periodic table in it, and I nodded to Estelle across the room, and the two of us walked out of that barn into the January cold, and I did not look back, because the reaction was complete and there was nothing left to watch. Now let me tell you how it unspooled after that, because the win in this story was never a single loud night. It was a slow motion collapse, and I watched most of it from a distance, which is exactly how I wanted it. The restitution demand went out that Monday, the $420,000 Vaughn had wired to himself, plus damages. He didn't have it. He'd spent a chunk in Nassau and sunk more into a down payment on a condo in the Old Port that he'd bought to impress Tara. And now Tara was 3 states of denial away from him and lawyering up on her own behalf. Kestrel's role in buying stolen client data became a liability that Halyard's counsel absorbed into the merger terms in a way that cost Tara Vance her severance and her non-compete leverage both. She left the industry within 8 months and, last I heard, was selling commercial real estate alongside the fiancé who did eventually marry her, a quieter life than the one she'd built on other people's engines. Vaughn settled the restitution over 18 months, rather than face criminal referral, which Estelle held over him like a lantern over a well. He sold the Old Port condo at a loss of $61,000. His name, in a business community as small as Southern Maine's, became the answer to a question people asked quietly before they signed anything. Whatever happened to Delacroix? And the answer traveled the way answers do in a place where everyone's cousin knows everyone's neighbor. He didn't get another partnership. He didn't get another easy room to stand up in. The charm that had come to him like height turned out to be a thing that only works until the first time everyone's seen you fall. I watched all of it from the corner office of a company I now ran, with my laminated periodic table framed on the wall behind my desk, Peter Okafor's silver marker facing out, where I could read it on the hard days. Potassium was patient. I'd made it patient. 31 clients became 140 inside 2 years. I kept Harlan Pruitt on staff at a salary that finally covered Dorothy's medical debt, and I gave him the Higgins Beach paperweight back with a note that said, "You put this on the right chair." He cried, of course. Harlan always cried. It's the best thing about him. And here's the part I didn't expect, the part that makes this an ending and not just a victory. 14 months after the party, Vaughn Delacroix asked to see me. Not to negotiate, the money was long since ordered, the career long since gone. He wanted, he said through Estelle, to apologize. My first instinct, the potassium instinct, was no. But I'd learned by then to distrust my fast answers, so I let him come to Estelle's office over the bakery on Congress Street, and I sat across a table from the man I'd built a company with and watched him tell the truth for what I believe was the first time in his adult life. He'd been broken open, is the only way I know to say it. He told me he'd been afraid his whole life of being ordinary, and that Tara had found that fear and used it like a handle, and that he'd told himself 100 stories about why selling me out was really just business, and that none of them had survived the moment his phone lit up under those Edison bulbs. He'd started seeing a therapist in Falmouth, a court-adjacent requirement at first, and then, he said, a thing he kept doing after the requirement lapsed. He didn't ask for anything. He didn't ask for his job or his reputation or my forgiveness. He just wanted me to know he finally saw the shape of what he'd done, which is, I'll note, the exact thing I'm good at, seeing the shape inside the mess. And it had taken him losing everything to learn to do it once. I want to be careful about what I tell you next, because it would be easy to make it sentimental, and it wasn't. I did not forgive him because I felt sorry for him, and I did not forgive him because I'm soft, because I'm not, and anyone who's read this far knows it. I let Vaughn Delacroix back into the smallest edge of my life, an occasional coffee, a quarterly check-in, nothing more, for one reason only, and it's the reason that makes it mine, because I could. Because I held every card, the money, the record, the company, the referral I could still make to a prosecutor if he ever so much as breathed wrong. And from inside that much power, a boundary isn't weakness, it's a choice. I set the terms in writing because I keep records in ink. He does not come near my business. He does not contact Ren, who is 23 now and finishing her master's in environmental engineering and doesn't need her grandmother's old betrayals in her inbox. He keeps his therapy or the coffees stop. And within those walls, which I built and I hold, and I can collapse at any hour of any day, I let a broken man have the dignity of trying to be better in my sightline. Because I decided that watching him rebuild, small and honest and afraid, was worth more to me than watching him rot. That's not mercy, exactly. It's authorship. There's a difference. And the difference is the whole life I got back. The chart still hangs behind my desk. I take it down sometimes and lay it flat on the conference table when a new client comes in, and I say what I've always said, that every client is an element, some stable and some volatile, and the art is knowing which is which before you mix them. They think it's a charming quirk. That's fine. The best tools look like party favors to the people who never learned to read them. So here is the one true thing I'll leave you with, and I mean it for you, whoever you are, listening to this in a car or a kitchen with your own quiet betrayal folded somewhere against your hip. The people who belittle the thing you carry have simply never learned to read it. Keep carrying it anyway. Keep your record in ink. And be patient, the way the reactive elements finally learn to be, because patience isn't the absence of fire. It's knowing exactly when to let it burn.